start. It's very pleasure to go become law, relationship, and the theme ethics and navigating the human research landscape. This is currently an important discussion that will take us to the core research principles and responsibilities involved in conducting research with human participants. Today's presentation will walk up key guidelines, current practices that ensure our research remains respectful, responsible, and we discuss the importance of informed consent, minimizing harm, and protecting vulnerable growth, and also examining the crucial role on institutional review board in safeguarding results. By the end of this presentation, discussion will talk to go a bit with a stronger understanding of how ethics is not just a formality but the foundation of trustworthy, human, and high quality. Let's introduce the discussant. Dr. Kanka is Kanka. Dr. Kanka is Kanka. Specialist in family medicine and renowned research. Currently, she is the chairperson of the Study She has experience in the field of human research, teaching, and public health policy over decades. The commitment to bridge the gap between theory and practice has led to be involved in the development of several public health policies, promoting a standard in medical research and patient care. Dr. Kalagar serves as a senior lecturer and is head of the Department of Public Health and Family Medicine, Faculty of Medicine, University of Nuremberg. He is the developer and coordinator of the public health team, which includes a research module, the medical undergraduate program. There she teaches ethical dimensions of healthcare technology and social justice. She also is the coordinator and the conference chairperson of the annual academic session of Faculty of Medicine, University of Nuremberg. Dr. Kalagar also has contributed to the National Strategic Master Plan 2016 to 2025 and 2016 2035 of the Ministry of Health, Sri Lanka. She also has coordinated and developed several other national health policies and management guidelines and has conducted several national level health surveys, including the National Non-Communicable Disease Risk Factor Survey. Dr. Kalagar has also delivered orations and invited speeches in several local and international conferences. Being an epidemiologist and a researcher, her research interest lies on non-communicable disease, disaster management, adolescent health, and nutrition. Dr. Kalagar has published several research articles in national and international peer-reviewed leading journals. She has several award-winning oral and poster presentations in several renowned national and international scientific conferences and has been awarded the National Research Council Award for Scientific Research for several years. Dr. Sankha also has been rewarded with the Health Excellence Award in 2010 and in 2021 by the Ministry of Health Sri Lanka for her noble service rendered during the humanitarian mission following the civil war in Sri Lanka and for her dedicated service in controlling and prevention of COVID-19 respectively. She also is a visiting lecturer, trainer, examiner, and a research supervisor for the Postgraduate Institute of Medicine, University of Columbia. She also is a visiting lecturer and examiner at Faculties of Medicine, University of Kadam, University of Academy, University of Srinagar, University of Punan, University of Dehradun, Rajarali, University of Sri Lanka, and University. Dear Madam, there are only welcome to our research lounge. So, thank you very much. Okay, so I warmly welcome you all to my research presentation on ethics Unveiled, then in the human research landscape. So basically today we will be talking about how to conduct research. Research mainly among humans, right? So I do know where you stand. Basically that's why I decided to do this image activity. You're seeing so many crossroads and it are really confused. I don't know, I'll try at least to give you a brief overview and navigating directly so that without any issue we will be able to do a meaningful research in the future. So right. Okay. So this is the pathway for the presentation today. So first we will be discussing about what is research ethics and what is actually human research ethics when it comes to at least the ethics related to human-based research. Then, of course, I will give you a brief idea or a bird's eye view or historical overview how the ethics came into play when it comes to research in humans. And then, of course, the objectives of ethics in human research. And with that, I will just give you an overall idea on role of institutional ethics within groups. Because obviously, if you are doing a study based on human research, you have to apply to a research ethics committee and then get the approval. So I will just give you an overall idea because sometimes people think that different ethics boards are very mean and not allowing you to do this study, but it is not so. So I'll give you a main idea of what our role is as a hierarchy committee when it comes to human research. Then, of course, we'll be covering up on ethical principles of human research. And lastly, on internal validity of study. It is why I want to talk about internal validity of the study. Internal validity of the study is one of the most important things because it is unfair and unethical for humans to undergo a study or to be a participant of the study which is not valid. Right? So therefore, that is why the ethics review committee will be looking into the internal validity of study as support. I hope the audience is aware of of research and therefore you know what validity means. Validity means actually getting the study whether it really matches or whether it really measures what we want to measure. Right? So if you have the research question, then it's based on the research question that you make the research protocol, right? So when you make the research protocol or plan, it has to ultimately give you the answer to your research question. So what we essentially are seeing is basically whether you have that internal value. So we will be discussing about it further as we go on. So that is my pathway for the presentation today. So we'll go at the end of the presentation, you are fairly clear about how to go about the research in humans. Right. So coming to the question, what is ethics? Ethics is basically a branch of philosophy. So it is philosophy which actually, discusses about the wrongdoings and what are the right doings. So it is where you talk about what is good and what is bad, what is good to be done and what is bad and what is wrong to be done. So mostly it is social, cultural as well as social, cultural, and religion, and so many other, influences will be there for you to understand or when it comes to practice, when it comes to ethics. Right? So yes, we have major components or major principles of ethics, but in addition to that, when you are conducting study, you might have to be aware of your study population as well, because some things which is considered okay, like who can say maybe because that might not be kind of okay to another population. So therefore, we have to understand what it is when it comes to your study population problem. So basically, ethics will guide you
as an investigator, as a researcher, as to what is correct or what is rather good for the people and what is not good for the people. Then, of course, therefore, ethics involves systematizing and recommending certain concepts on right and wrong behavior, especially when you are doing the research as researchers, right? So that is what ethics are. So when it comes to research ethics, so basically we will be talking about the ethical principles, right? So there are certain ethical principles which we will be coming into in a short period of time, right? So these ethical principles, you have to apply all these ethical principles, not only in conducting, but also in planning, conducting, as well as publishing. So most of the time, where researchers go wrong, yes, there is that very well because at least it is being tested and checked even the IRB committee. So if you have to get the research ethics committee approval, you have to include that in your protocol, how you're going to include the fundamental principles, ethics principles in your study. So, and then therefore, because of that, you conduct it ethically also, but sometimes you will forget that research ethics is published. Right, so there are certain things that you have to consider in publishing also. Now, if you do a study, and if you do not publish it, now, what is the main reason of doing a study? Why we do the study is because we see a gap in the knowledge, right? So we see a gap in the knowledge, therefore, based on that, you create a research spreadsheet and you plan a study and you find the results to fill in that gap. And then if you're not publishing it, again, it is not ethical. It is not ethical by, as a researcher, and it is not ethical by the study participants as well. Because we have to give that research finding to the people who are study populated with, and not only that, but the policymakers also, because which is based on your study that it will improve now, especially when it comes to their human-based research. So in fact, from the medical background. I'll talk about health researchers more, okay? So if it's a health research study, if you're finding that maybe a certain drug is more effective and efficient to a certain disease rather than standard treatment that you already have, then if you're not publishing that, then it is again not ethical because you have a good drug in your hand, but by not publishing it, you are not allowing policymakers to make the decision to change the treatment or guidelines of treatment. So therefore, you are not, giving the best to the people, to the study population. So therefore, that is very important for you as researchers or investigators to make sure that your, the fundamental ethical principles are considered in publishing the research as such. Right? Okay, so also you have kind of guidelines, which actually guides you as an investigator how to do your study, right? How to conduct the study in a more scientific as well as ethical way, and also how to disseminate, right? And therefore, research ethics will definitely give you guidelines how to conduct the research responsibly, right? So responsibly. Basically, if you are looking at, if you are properly applying fundamental ethical principles in conducting a study, planning, conducting, and even publishing the research, you yourself as an investigator will be protected as well as your study participants or study population. So it is always both the sides. It is not only for the study population, right? So you have to understand that. Research ethics are there not only for the, to protect the rights and safeguard the study population, but definitely safeguard you as well, right? Because all these are legally bound, right? So therefore, we will understand how it goes, right? So now, as I told you, I will just give you a brief idea on how the ethical conduct came into human research, right? So research, of course, can improve life, especially health-related, studies definitely will improve life, right? So if it is a study on, let's say, a drug, let's say a surgical intervention or anything, right? So that definitely will improve the life. But definitely, on the other hand, it can have the possibility or the potential to cause harm also. So therefore, we always have to balance the risks and the benefits that is provided by the research. So that is why the ethics in something play into human lives or human beings study. And also, we can talking about talking a little bit about past incidences where these ethics standards were not actually applied because those days it was not highly discussed and on one quality of certain countries or certain political governments or whatever happened. So therefore those incidences led to discuss harm and even complications related to health or certain complications in life or the quality of life of people, and sometimes it can cause the death also. That is another reason why ethics came into play when it comes to human research. And then also, as I told you, ethics will safeguard both the participant and the research. So considering because you are also human and your study population of study participant is also human. So to safeguard both of you, both the sides are in the balance. That is why ethics came into play. So going back into that, I told you over here that we will be discussing three areas. The third argument on certain past incidences, why this ethical conduct of human research came into play, or why ethics have to be considered when you are doing a research, unlike in a machine or unlike in animals, but now animal research also has certain ethics. But when it comes to research. So first and foremost, I want to or talk to you about the Nuremberg Trials, right? So this is something that you really have to read if you are interested in learning how it came into play. This is a very, if you read the whole story, it is very interesting, right? So following the World War II, so certain military tribunals, of course, were held to prosecute the prominent leaders of, Nazis, right? So among those, one was the doctor's trial, right? So in this trial, so in this Nuremberg trial, certain medical experiments were conducted among the prisoners, and those were conducted without their consent, right? So at consent, and that ultimately resulted in, them to suffer, basically the prisoners to suffer, right? So with all these Nuremberg trials, as the things of the war getting settled, and when people started being more diplomatic and discussing about the things, then of course they realized the importance of having certain certain conditions when you're doing any research in humans. Right? So that is how the Nuremberg Code came in 1947 with 10 ethical principles, right? So among those 10 ethical principles, we have the voluntary informed consent, right? So that means if you are doing a study in humans, you have to have the voluntary participation, and also you have to get informed consent. It is not just the consent, right? Would you like to do this? No, you have to do, and you have to obtain an informed consent. Informed consent means you have to give the full information. Whether it is good or bad, doesn't matter. Let the person decide because they have a certain level of IQ. So, but as an investigator, as the researcher, you have to divulge all the information related to the treatment or the procedure that you are going to do in the study. Right? And then let the particular person decide whether he is ready to go ahead or not. Now, this is very important I will give you more details as we go on. But, just to give you an example now, since we are doctors, right, if I'm going to do a study, I can do any study among my patients, right? So patients in that case is a vulnerable population. Why? Because patients have a certain relationship with me, with their doctor. And there is, whatever the doctor said, it is considered as a gospel truth, and they will, whatever I say, they will listen to it, right? So if I'm going to do, so therefore I have the monopoly or I have the authority and power to do whatever I want to do. People. So that is why, voluntary informed consent is necessary, right? So they have to, be informed of the risk and the benefit, and then let the research participant or that particular person to decide whether to go ahead with this study or not. Okay, and then the second one that Nuremberg Code included was one of the among the 10. Another one which is most important is research should be truthful, right? So that means the research should be, or the research findings should be, should give something important to the good of the society, if it is not necessary, if it is not delivering something good to the society, there is no point in doing that study or letting the humans to go through that study. So that is why when it comes to ethics board, right, that is why we check for your background as well as your justification for the study. Right, so if there is no proper justification, so first in the background, I will come into these details later on, right? So that is why we have to check, right? Because there is no point now. Even if I ask for a name or the age of a particular person, that is all that particular person's personal detail, right? There is no way that I can, just because I want it, I can't ask it because research is, I always tell this to my trainees, research is not, it's not, finding out gossips, right? So you're asking something, if you're asking something from the study participant, it has to have a meaning, it has to have a value to answer to your research question. Otherwise, you should not ask that, right? So that is why always when you're conducting a study, it has to ultimately, it has to be important and give you something good or give this, your study population or the society something good out of your research. Otherwise, as ethics board, especially human-based research, we will not allow you to give this study, to go ahead with the study. And then, of course, Nuremberg Code also included unnecessary physical and mental suffering should be avoided. Right? So even if I'm asking about your sexual relationships or maybe from any other diseases or anything that I'm talking about, not necessarily the sensitive question, but still we have to avoid all the physical and mental suffering. Right? So it is very important that we consider all these things when we are conducting studies nowadays, because it's ultimately this basis came from the Nuremberg trial, because it results in Nuremberg trial overall resulted in a lot of physical and mental suffering to the prisoners at that time. So therefore, ultimately it became the foundation for the modern research ethics, which included or which gave us the importance of consent and risk minimization. So that is one incident that I wanted to share with you. Another one is basically the Tuskegee Syphilis Study, right? So in Tuskegee Syphilis Study, what happened is, so basically those days, we had the US, United States, there were a lot of, let's say, Black Americans or African men who were working in US, right? So they basically all these Americans, they conducted a study called as the syphilis study, where they had 600 African men, 399 with syphilis, and 201 without, right? So they were given the idea that if you participate in this particular study, they will be provided with free healthcare. So again, they were deceived with that particular statement, right? And then later on, as the time went by, people identified syphilis can be treated with penicillin, right? So, medicine is something where it evolves very quickly, right? Nowadays, of course, medicine evolves within 24 hours, right? So, now as an example, I'm just deviating the topic. We don't teach the medical students nowadays what we learn as medical students has evolved a lot. Right, so it is like that. So as the study or the cohort study was going on, the people realized that penicillin as a drug of choice or the standard treatment to treat penicillin, but to treat syphilis, but still the study participants were not given of the treatment, right? So and also they were not informed of the disease condition also, and also the objective of the study, right? So because of this, when this happened, and then people, slowly realized what is actually happening because it went on for a long time. I hope you know that, different study designs are there. So cohort studies take a long time to do, right? So during that time, people's information also improved. So therefore, they ultimately realized that, these people are being, let's say, mistreated. So therefore, a big, public movement happened. And therefore, certain things related to ethics human research came into play. So in this particular study, there was lack of informed consent, deception because they were told that they would be given free healthcare, which did not happen. And also the treatment was withheld, And just because they were vulnerable population based on their race as well as their socioeconomic condition, right? They were exploited. So those were the ethical violations that happened during that study. So that ultimately, because of that public movement, ultimately resulted in the National Research Act in US, that is 1974, right? So that ultimately resulted in mandating the establishing or the establishment of institutional review boards to review human research protocols. So that is why most most establishments or institutions that conduct human-based studies have institutional research groups. So they will be going through all the human research protocols. The other one is, of course, the Belmont Report. So it is published by the National Protection of Human Samples for Biomedical and Behavioral Investigation in the US. In response to the different incidences that happened in the past, including the Nuremberg Trial as well as Tuskegee Syphilis Study. So because of that, in addition to those ethical principles that came out with those incidences, they also in their report they said that there should be respect for persons and beneficence and justice. So beneficence means doing no harm and always being beneficial to the people. So that is where your risk-benefit analysis of the study came into play, right? And justice for people. Justice means equal distribution of the harms and risks to the study population of the society, right? So that's how it came into play. So basically, Belmont Report was the basic guideline that the institutional review boards have. Right. So with that, of course, we had several other improvements in ethical principles. Right. So starting with the Nuremberg Code in 1947, we had then the World Medical Association Declaration of Health Safety. So now this 1964 Declaration of Health Safety is the baseline for conducting human research or human-based research. Right. So even if you are going to apply for Q1, Q2, if you're going to publish your Q1, Q2 journal, definitely the requirement says they will ask for you as researchers or investigators to declare that we conducted the study based on the declaration or the principle based, even in the supervision of testing. So this is the baseline for your to learn as researchers or investigators to conduct research into. Then of course came the Belmont Report, and now we have two other that we consider. One thing is the SIOM's guideline, right? So that is of course the standards and operational guidance for ethics review in human research, human related research. So SIOM's guideline is one way that your IRB or institutional research board will look into your study protocol, and also we have the WHO guidelines. Right, so we have SIOM's guidelines as well as the WHO guidelines. But those two are mostly for the IRBs or institutional research boards. But as a researcher or an investigator, the most basic one is for you to go through the Declaration of Health and make sure that all the principles are being addressed in your study. So now, so far we have discussed about what is research ethics. And then I have given you a brief, brief and basically a bird's eye view on historical overview. Next comes to the objectives of ethics in human research, right? Basically, why we need to do the studies or why we need to base the human research on ethics, as well as a little bit on the role of institutional ERCs, just to give you an idea why certain ERCs behave in a certain way. Right? Okay, sorry. Okay, so why it is important to have ethics in human research, right? So mainly it is to protect the human study pathway. Now, always what I tell everyone is when you are a researcher, think yourself as a study pathway, right? Would you like to come, would you like any stranger? Because for your study participants, you are a stranger, right? So you are an investigator, you are a hotshot person, that doesn't matter to study participants. But if you consider, put yourself in their shoes and think, okay, so if a stranger comes to me and asking, all my age, my sex, what is my gender, orientation, what is my income, what are the diseases that I have, how do I eat, how do I exercise. Would you like to reveal all your personal information, right? So no one would like that, right? So that is why, when you have to think it in that what to say, in that perspective, for you to understand why it is important to have ethics in a human-based study. So basically, having ethics in a human research will protect the human study part, right? Protecting several ways, including protecting their dignity, their rights, because in developing countries like ours, people do not know their rights very well. I'm sure as investigators, sometimes we also don't know our rights very well, because how many people know the Constitution? How many people know what are the human rights that you can, what are the things that we can stand up, what are the things that we can demand for, right? Nobody does, and especially in developing countries where, your educational level is, comparatively low. People do not know. So in a way, we are all vulnerable, right? So we should not allow our vulnerability to be exploited by some strangers. So that is why all these ethics are there, right? And also it considers the welfare, right? So imagine you as a human being going to a trial to a drug trial, without knowing the proper harms and the benefits from that particular drug or the derivative of drug, and you die from as a complication from that study. What will happen to your family, right? So it is not only you. You have to consider about the family of the of your study participant as well. So that is why, I mean, in health we always say we do not treat only the disease, right? We're treating as the patient or the person, right? So it is the holistic. We have to take that person as a holistic manner, right? So that is where your, safetyness of the human study participant comes into play, and that is why cases should be there. And the other point is to ensure that the research is directed in a manner so that it makes sure that, the study participants or the study population or the community is, somehow benefited, right? So as I told you, if your research is if your research question is not going to add any value to the society, then it is no point in conducting that study, right? In the point of researcher's point of view, yes, it is a waste of your resources, it is a waste of your time and your, sweat and all that. But when it comes to the society, when it comes to the study participants, it is an utter waste, right? So therefore, to protect such, basically being guinea in such studies also we have ethics in place, right? And also, we have ethics to make sure the reliability of the research, right? So it is validity and reliability. So therefore, you have to ensure that the risks in a particular study is being controlled, and whether the informed consent is being taken, whether the confidentiality is maintained, whether the privacy of the study participants are concerned, so on and so forth, we will come into speak. So that is why basically all this human research or the ethics in human research has come to play. Now, as an example, where coming to the third world market, I'm talking to you about that, let's say, I'm in a forum like this, and if I ask about your sexual behavior in front of everyone, how would you feel? Right? So it completely breaches your privacy. So that is why your ethics comes into play. That is a place where your ethics come into play, and where your institutional review board will check into the details of how are you going to conduct the study. Right? So that is why all these ethics come into play, especially when it comes to human research. Right. So with that background, I will give you a brief overview on what the role of IRBs, what institutional review boards are. Right. So the role is basically of ethics review committee is to ensure that all your protocols, all the study protocols which are human based, basically apply all the ethical principles into their study, not only in planning, not conducting, as well as in publishing. That is why if you go through a protocol template or the what to say template or the components that we ask in a protocol, it has I will come into those details, right? So it has all the things related to your planning, related to your purpose of the study as well as publication, right? Because all, as I discussed so far, all the things include all the components of your study until you publish and complete it. Until then, all the ethics principles or ethical principles have to be maintained, right? So therefore, definitely the main role of your IRB or ethics review committee is to ensure that your study is ethically conducted, right? In addition to that, it checks whether your study protects the dignity, rights, and the well-being of the study participants. Also, it assists in developing as well as educating the research community in local healthcare requirements, right? Or conducting research related to the requirements of the society, right? So why I wanted to put this slide is because mostly, ERCs are always being blamed. Okay, so by the researchers, right? So research, especially when it comes to human-based researchers, they are very strict, right? Very strict, and we do not, if there is a lapse in any way in your protocol, and if IRB feels that, that this study is not being conducted or there are lapses in the ethics, then definitely we will not allow you to go ahead with the study, right? But it does not mean that we are, really do that, not allowing you to do the study and have to all complete. No, but we will find out those things and point out those things to you as the investigator to clarify and to improve your study and then get back to us. And if you address all these, components, then yes, definitely we will allow you to go ahead with the study. But if not, if we feel that the study population's ethics are being violated in any way, then definitely we will not allow you to go ahead with the study. So if you speak to, any even undergraduates, postgraduates, any researcher who is doing research, human-based researchers, they will say, I do this ethics review committee in my head, or they don't understand our problems. They asking this, they asking that, and they might sometimes think and say, they don't have any other better job to do, maybe a memories and anything. That is why they are not allowing me to go ahead with the study. So all these blames come into the ERC. That happens, right? But mind you, when the ERC committee takes a decision, it is the committee that takes a decision. So as an example, let's say Dr. Naini puts a protocol into my ERC, and maybe I have a personal drive with her. So I cannot say no. I don't like her, so therefore I'm not going to allow this study to go on and hinder your progress. Right? No, it has nothing to do like that, right? So basically, it is all very objective. Your protocol analysis is all objective, right? So there is no place the subjectivity can come into play, right? So that is why I say now I will come to the principles of ethics later on. But then, so understand when a research ethics committee asks you more clarification or asks you to improve your study, it is mainly because your study has lapses when it comes to ethics, right? So as IRBs, it is our main aim is to protect the study participant. Yes, it automatically will protect you as an investigator because if the participant puts a law case or simple view, then yes, it protects you because if your protocol is there. You understand? So it's like that, it goes both the way. So therefore, so that is why I wanted to put this slide on the role of institutional review. Right. So we will come into the next step, that is your ethical principles in research. So I'm just giving you an overall idea because as I told you, it protects both the researchers and participants, right? So for the researcher, it allows you to showcase. Now let's say your study participants, some reason, some reason can complain or can sue you, right? On non-ethical conduct of your study. So yes, so the researchers, if you have addressed all the ethical principles, then it shows that you have maintained your integrity, right? And definitely it shows your competence also. Now, sometimes the researchers are asking from the ERC committee, why are you selecting our CV? Why should I give my CV which is personal to you? Right? So why we are asking for the CV is to make sure that all the researchers are competent in conducting the study. If you are totally novel to conducting a study, we will definitely ask you to have a supervisor who is competent in conducting human research. And we will ask that particular PE to ensure that particular person has conducted several studies in humans and therefore he or she is competent in conducting human research. Right? Otherwise, we will not allow you because it is just like you leaving your life in the hands of a dog. Right? Because if we allow that, we are just allowing a vulnerable study participant to go into the hands of another person who has basically has minimal ideas on protecting that particular participant. Right. Right. So that is why we are always check for your competence in conducting this study as well. Right. And then also the researchers, we will see whether you are responsible or whether you are conducting the study responsibly and also honestly. Right. And for the participants, there are many. Right. So if we maintain the dignity, justice, non-maleficence means not doing any harm, beneficence means doing the benefits, autonomy, privacy, and confidentiality, and so on. So we will come to that in brief. Right. So when it comes to honesty, that you have to, as an investigator or a researcher, you have to be honest about the benefits as well as risk. Right. And also the methodology. What will you be doing during this study? What will you do to the study participant? Will you give a drug? What will you ask? Whether you will be asking questions, whether you will be going through the notes or the health records of that particular person, or investigation, whether we will be drawing blood, right? Or if we take a blood sample, whether we will be storing it for a certain period of time. So that honesty has to be there. As I told you that, informed consent has to be given by the party. So for him to give the consent, he has to be informed. So informed of the risk, benefits, the methodology, and so on and so forth. Right? So that honesty should be there. And then of course the integrity. Right? So integrity, you have to make sure that you are sincere in this particular stand. Then the objective, right? Minimizing bias. I'm not going into the details of bias, I'm sure you all know. If not, that is a particular topic to be discussed, right? So you have to minimize the bias because that is where the integrity of the study comes into play, right? So if the study is full of flaw, then again we will not allow you to do a study, right? Then definitely informed consent, we have discussed about that, and then the respect of parties. You have to respect their autonomy. If they say that no, I'm unwilling to participate in your study, then you cannot pressurize that particular person. And also, if that person, after giving consent also at any point in time in the during the study, they should have the autonomy to withdraw their consent to participate in the study without even having to give any excuses or explanation. Right? And by that action, that particular person should not get any adverse effects. Now, especially as I'm saying, now, sometimes, as I told you previously, if I'm the person who is conducting a study and I'm asking my participants or my patient to, be a participant in this study. And, as time goes on, he may think that, no, I want to be part of this study, but I'm scared off of the study, thinking that because I'm the treating physician, I might not, I might mistreat or I might not give the proper treatment to that particular person, right? So that insecurity should not be there, right? So that has to be properly informed to the study participant or to the people that you're approaching or inviting to become study partners, right? So that respect or that autonomy should be maintained throughout the study. And of course, the benefits. You always have to maximize the benefits of the participants, right? And of course, non-maleficence, especially when it comes to the study, the main thing is do no harm, right? If you cannot do anything, we sometimes say, in our day-to-day life, if you cannot do anything helpful, don't do anything, right? So it's like that. So do no harm. You cannot do any harm to any of the study participants. And also, it should be responsible publication, right? So, you have to promote and update the knowledge. So, if you have studied, you have conducted the study, if you have study finding, you have to publish it. That is also a bigger practice, right? And also, you have to make sure that, patient anonymity and is maintained, and the participants are not discriminated based on the sex or based on the age, based on the sexual orientation these days a lot, right? And based on the socioeconomic conditions, the patients or the participants should not be discriminated, right? And also always the the person's anonymity should be maintained. There should not be any way that anyone can trace that particular finding to the particular person. Right? So sometimes, so that is why we prohibit from collecting the name and the addresses from the study participants, because you can always, trace them back to that particular person. And even the addresses, right? And if it is students or, university students, we do not allow them to take, we do not, it's better not to get the, student ID or anything. But it depends on the study or the research question again, right? Now, let's say, these days we are conducting a study about depression among undergraduates or whatever, right? So, if that particular participant is found to be depressed, right? Then we have to do something to that person, right? So in that case, you will have to definitely, try to trace that particular person and get that particular person referred to the management. So in that case, here you are allowed to, get that particular participant's identification detail. But then again, that has to be properly informed to the study participant and get consent to collect their names and the student ID or whatever. Right? Why I'm collecting this has to be properly justified and informed the study part. Then, of course, confidentiality. Right? So when you learn something new, now especially this comes into sexual and reproductive health researchers or anything, not only the sensitive one. So even if you're talking about alcohol intake or smoking or whatever, right? Anything. Even if I ask for your age, that is also confidential information to that particular participant or that particular person. So that confidentiality has to be maintained. You should not go around and gossip about the findings to someone else. Yeah. And the other one is the intellectual property, right? So I'm pretty sure that you all know about plagiarism and everything. So you should never plagiarize. Right? And of course, the justice, fair distribution of benefits and birth of the study. Right? So these are all the the research principles that we consider, right? So starting from here. These are the principles of research that we consider mainly when we conduct human studies. So when we go through, or you as researcher, you have to ensure that all these principles of research, ethics are being addressed in your study. Because these are the things that we will go through your protocol and check as an ERC. Right? And then, of course, as I told you, why these principles of research is there, mainly to minimize the risk, to make sure that the informed consent is taken, to ensure that anonymity and confidentiality is maintained, autonomy of the study participants is maintained, and of course the internal validity of the study. Right? So that is where it is. Right. So now, so far in our presentation, we have discussed about the research ethics. I have given you the historical overview. We discussed about why the ethics are required in human ethics, human research, and just a brief idea on why the role of IRBs are, and then of course the ethical principles in human research. So the last part is internal validity of the study. So why I wanted to discuss about the internal validity of the study is that when you submit a protocol to a human on a human research or human-based research to a ethics review committee, they will definitely check for the internal validity of the study. Why it is mainly if your study is not accurate, if your study is not going to the validity means accuracy, right? Accuracy of your study. So if you have a research question, So the research question asks you to answer that research question, only you will conduct the study and you will find the answers by conducting the study, the research question, right? So if your study is not going to answer to that research question at the end of the study, that means you do not have the validity of that study. So if a particular study is invalid, then it is highly unethical for a study participant or for a human to undergo or to be a participant in that particular study. So that is why IRBs will check into your methodology and your protocol in detail. Because this is one of the most common claims that we get. Ethics committee should check only the ethics related things or the ethical principles when it comes to human-based studies and not the methodology. But no, why we check the methodology is to ensure that your internal validity is there, right? Okay, so in internal validity, what do we check? One thing is now the title. Title basically shows what your research question is, right? So the title, general objective, and the specific objective should be aligned. So what is the difference between general and specific objective? I'm sure you know about these things, right? So title indicates your research question, and general objective is how you are going to, answer that objective or the research question, right? So what am I going to do to answer that research question, which is in the title, right? Specific objective is that you're going to break the general objective into several specific, areas. By achieving the specific objective, you will automatically achieve the general objectives, thereby ultimately you answer into research question, right? So therefore, your title, general objectives, and specific objectives have to be aligned. Now, sometimes we see in protocols, your title says something else, your general objective says something else, and your specific objective, you are saying something else. Right? So, in that case, obviously, your internal validity is not there. You understand? And there are surprises. Now, when it comes to specific objective, there are surprises. Like our open you are asking something from the patient, which is ultimately, completely irrelevant to your research. Right? So that is why I always say research is not for you to do something possible, that is something which is not necessary, or you think, okay, fine in the future, this might come into play. No. Your research question has to be very specific. And that research question should be properly shown in the title, and then the general objective should show how to achieve that particular, how to get that answer through whatever you're doing. Right? And then the specific objectives should be in line with general objective. If they are not in line, then that means you're achieving something other than what is expected in the general objective. So that means definitely it is not in line with the title. That means it is outside your research question, right? So that is why we check all these three to be whether they are in line or not, right? And then of course the background, right? So background sometimes if we, researchers think, okay, fine, just give some, references, quote some studies, and that is the end of it. No. Why it is important to give you a proper background is when you have found out the research question, right? So I told you that research always when you're doing a study, your study should give something positive or it should be important for the study population or your community. If it is not going to give something good to the community, again, that is a breakage or breaking the ethics, right? So such studies it will not allow you to do, right? So therefore, background it is where you have to show the importance of your research question. Now, as an example, I'm sorry for taking examples from medicine because I'm a medical person. That is right? So if you are saying that okay, leprosy and I don't know if you would understand autonomic cardiomyopathy or whatever, right? So the burden of autonomic cardiomyopathy following leprosy is very rare, right? So imagine you letting about 500 study participants to go through a study which is not, where the condition is also very rare. And you cannot even do anything about it later on. Right? So I'm just giving you an objective example, right? So in that case, we will not allow you to do that study. So therefore, in the background, you really have to show that your research question is informed, that it is a conditional burden, right? So meaning a burden to the population. right? So if you're going to do a study on some area on diabetes, then you have to show why diabetes is important, what this particular area in diabetes is important, what is the morbidity, what morbidity means the disease burden, what is the mortality means what are the deaths that are there. So likewise, you have to give the background and show that this particular research question in your mind is very important, right? And then, of course, the justification. So justification is where you're showing why it is important to do your particular study, right? So in the background, you showed why the research question or the research area is important. But in justification, what you're showing is why this particular study that you're going to do is important, right? So maybe it is a very good study or very good research question, right? As an example, now if you consider, there are certain diseases which are very common in Western world and which is very common in developing world, right? So as an example, let's say we take dengue, right? So if you're going to do a study related to dengue in US, you will never get ethical access. Why? Because it is a very rare disease in US or wherever, in the Western world, right? So because there is no point in doing such studies in this area. So likewise, so that is where your importance in the research question comes into play. But now let's say justification is why it is important for your own study. Now let's say you're saying dengue, but dengue also something very rare if you're doing, right? So then why do you think it is important to do this particular study? Right? So that is what the justification is. So all that basically shows that your particular study is valid rather than valid, that that you're conducting your study will be something beneficial to your population, right? So that is what is expected or that is what is reviewed in your background and justification. So that is the principle that we need check over there, right? And then of course literature review to show that literature review, what we have to say is basically what is the knowledge that we know so far about it, and what is the knowledge gap. Now, if it is a study which has been really extensively studied, a research question which has been extensively studied around the world, locally, everywhere, right? Then there is no point in you doing this study again, right? So that is why you have to show the literature review as well, right? And literature review again, you have to do a critical analysis of the studies, right? I'm not going into details on that. So that is why the literature review comes into play. Then of course the methods. Mark my word, methods definitely they will go into details of it, right? So coming to study design. Is this study design that you're planning to do is the best study design to answer your research question, right? So there are several epidemiological study designs for humans that can be done. So among those study designs, is that the particular, is your particular study design that you have mentioned, is that the best study design to go ahead and answer to your research question. If it is not, then we cannot allow you to go ahead with the study. Then the study setting, right? Where you're doing the study. Is it the best place to answer to your study question, right? Study population, right? Is the particular study population that you have selected is the best study population to answer to your research question. Sample size calculation, it has to be always a scientific way of calculating. Sampling technique, how you're selecting the study units should be always scientific, right? So there are different sampling techniques that you have to do. So when you're writing the sampling technique, you have to go up to the level of selection of the study unit. Study unit means single study participant, right? So sometimes you will, most of the protocols, what you have said is that, they will say random sample, whatever, very simply they say. But then, how are you going to go up to the level of, now let's say you're going to do a study in about obesity in undergraduate, right? So then you're saying you're just selecting a random sampling technique. But random sampling among who, right? Now there are, if you take in University of Monaco, there are several faculties. In several faculties, there are so many years. And in particular year, there are so many students. So how are you going to select that particular study participant with your study? So going up to that detail, until then, minor detail into the level, how you are going to select the study participant. right, or the study unit. Up till that level, you have to write the sampling technique, otherwise it will not be allowed to progress, right? Then of course the study variables that you are going to ask from the study participant, that has to be declared. So if you haven't declared it, you cannot ask from the study participant. Okay, so whatever you are going to ask from the study participants, you have to declare. Then of course the data collection tool, right? So data collection tool, again, I can speak hours and hours only about the data collection tool itself. So you have to, properly identify the most or the best data collection tool, right? So if we are taking a tool from outside, whether it is validated in Sri Lanka, right? So you can take questions from some other country, but most of their cultures and everything is completely different from ours. And sometimes you ask questions from our people, it is not even there in the country. You understand? So therefore the local validity. If it is not validated, then how are you going to validate into our population, right? So like that, there are so many things. And then the data analysis. How you are going to analyze is also important, right? Because if you analyze and if the way of your analysis is not going to properly answer to your research question, then again we cannot allow the study to go on, right? Because your analysis should be to answer to your study question. If it is not, then there is no point in conducting that study. Then of course the ethical consideration, that is what are the ethical principles that you are mainly looking at in making your study. Then of course, yes, budget will also be checked. Why? Because we want to know within this budget whether that particular study can be done or not, right? And also the Gantt chart. Gantt chart means your, like the important activity, I don't like, your plan, which month, what are you going to do and so on, right? So that Gantt chart also has to be proper. Because sometimes you put, data collection or ethics review, you put only half a month. You will never get ethics review within half a month. You should at least give 2 months, even for you to, first time go through, right? And then, like that. So analysis, data entering, you can, even if you're, especially if you are a single investigator, you cannot do it within 1 day or 2 days, right? So that chart also we will check. So all that basically what we are checking is whether your planning, your conduct, and even your publication of yes, I have listed that under methods. We have to write the dissemination of your study findings as well. So up to the level of publication, we will check whether you are maintaining the ethical conduct or not. Right? So I think that is it. So we have so far throughout the presentation, we have discussed what is research ethics and ethics in human research, then gave a very brief idea on historical overview, how ethics came into play when it comes to human-based research. Then, of course, the objectives, why ethics should be there in human research, and the role of ethics review board, ethics review committee. And then, of course, the ethical principles in human research and why the internal validity has to be maintained in this step. Right? So, if you have done, I hope you understood it. If you have understood it, I know you started. If you have, I don't know where you stand where you stood at the beginning, but I hope I have navigated you properly, your destination properly, so that you can conduct a human research. So, yeah, thank you. That's it.
So, yeah, researchers and please welcome your questions, comments. Feel free to share your thoughts.
Survey question, is there a minimum?
Survey question, sorry.
Survey question.
Yes.
Is there a minimum number of sample sizes?
Right, okay. So now the question is, I don't know the name. The question from one of the audience is that one member of the audience is that whether there is a minimum sample size to conduct a survey. Yeah, right, okay. Now, that is always when you conduct, especially when you are conducting a human-based research, as I told you, you have to have a sample size calculation, right? It has to be done with that. Sample size has to be calculated, has to be scientifically calculated. So when we calculate the sample size, what we calculate is the required minimum sample size, right? So minimum required sample size to get that particular result that you're looking into in the research question, right? So as an example, if I want to know the knowledge about diabetes among undergraduates, let's say, right? So then from the previous studies, I will identify the proportion of students who will have a good good knowledge on diabetes, right? Because that is my research question, right? Whether the undergraduates are having a good knowledge on diabetes, right? So if you have that particular proportion from other countries, if you can, maybe local, maybe regional means Southeast Asian region, better. If not, even local, doesn't matter. If you have the local studies, that would be the best, right? If not, go for regional studies related to that topic, or otherwise, work, right? Any study. So if you have that particular proportion from your literature, right, then you can utilize that particular proportion into your sample size, and then you are calculating the minimum required sample size for you to at least obtain that much of result. So let's say that particular study gives you that the 60% of the undergraduates had a good knowledge on that, right? So in your sample size equation, it will be 60%, right? So that means ultimate sample size that you are calculating is the minimum number of samples or the minimum number of study population that we would require. After that, we would require to at least get a result of 60% with good knowledge. Do you understand? So that is the when you calculate the scientific sample size calculation, that is the minimum required sample size that you are calculating, right? Why we are calculating the minimum? Again, now let's say your minimum sample size, the calculated sample size comes into 200, right? But you know that as you increase the sample size, your results are much more better, and then your results would be more or less equal to the population value, right? So in that case, you are thinking, okay, fine, if it is 200, I will do this study all down, right? But that again is not, right? That again will not be allowed for you to go ahead. Why? Because if you can get that result from 200 people, then it is unethical for you to go ahead and approach 500 people to get that. You understand? So again, there should be always, there is no minimum sample size as such to particularly for a special rule. You always have to calculate actually. Then again, I'm complicating things more to you, right? So again, sample size calculation will depend on your study design. Okay, so I don't know whether you all know different study design. So you have observational study design, experimental study design, so observational, analytical and descriptive study, descriptive and analytical. So descriptive study design is labeled a separate sample size category. For analytical study, cohort study, it's a separate category. Case control is a separate calculation. The cross-sectional analytical study is a separate category. And experimental study is a separate category. So it depends on the study design. So based on your study design, so you will decide on the study design based on your research question, right? So based on that, you have to do the single sample size calculation and then go ahead and and sometimes if you're doing, I don't know whether I'm teaching you more, right? If you're doing, again, it might change based on your sampling technique. So if you're going for a cluster sampling rather than a simple random, you know that simple random is the best. So if you're not going ahead with that, that means you are introducing an error based on your sampling technique. So then you have to correct it with the design effect answer. And then we mentioned that you're not demonstrating. Yeah, so that is the standard value. Depends on the expression and your study and the proportion that you have on it. If not, you can calculate with 50%. Let's say now, if you want, I'll take the same example. If it is under the diabetes, knowledge on diabetes among undergraduates, but there are no studies taken. There are no studies conducted different. You are just perfect. The thing is to think about it, right? So in that case, you don't have any studies to reform. Then in that case, yes, you can put the proportion as 50%. So if you put the 50%, you will get the maximum sample size.
For online participants, you can unmute the you can ask the question you have, or you can contact live.
They're not asking questions because they couldn't understand anything, or I know I agree that I had a lot to deliver within 1 hour. I don't know whether I went too far. Right, okay. So in our faculty, for the medical faculty of University of Morocco, the deadline has started the deadline for submission. So every third Tuesday, we have the research committee meeting on every month, third Tuesday, right? So you have to submit a proposal on the last day of last working day of the previous month. So, right? So now today, now this is due. So if you want your proposal to be submitted or discussed in your July board, then you have to submit on the last working day before 3 p.m. In June. Right? And then once you have submitted that proposal, there is a checklist. So you have to go to the website. There are, there is a checklist that you have to maintain. So you have to give your CVs, as I told you, why we select those things, right? And then the application has to be filled. You have to give the protocol, right? And the test and form information sheet and the questionnaire in all three languages. And why all three languages again? To make sure that none of the participants are discriminated based on their language, right? And so there is a checklist, and then you have to do a minimal payment of 3,000 if you are able. For undergraduates, it's free of charge. For students of the University of Morocco, it is free of charge. But for academics, it's only 3,000. If it is on-site study, it is 50,000. Because you can definitely make that claim on funding. Right. So make the relevant payment to the Bertha and we just leave. Or to the short down, yeah, and then you can come to the slip, some slip, and then submit all of that electronically to the IRBs at UNveiled. It's on the -ERC at UNveiled email. Then there is the administrative secretary who will go through all your documents and check whether the checklist is completed. Now in the application itself, your checklist is there. The documents, the documents that has been there. So you yourself can make an evaluation on that. So the administrative secretary will go through your email, check all the details. Whether all your documents are completed. If it is so, if it is not so, she will write back to you, she will write back to you, stating that these particular documents are not there, so we can be submitted. If not, she only will say that it is well received and you will be given a particular ERC number. Right, so from there onwards, you will be referred to or all communications will be based on the ERC ID number. Right, and we are making a publication also, that is the number that you have to be there. Right, so and then it will go to primary reviewer. So without your CP, then your competence and it will be checked by the secretary and the chairperson to make sure your competence and study. Afterwards, without your CP, without your name or anything, it is a blank review. We will go to primary reviewers, mainly based on your study. So there is an expert on that particular study, we will go to that particular person. And yeah, thank you. Yes, right. So so it is a blind to reviewer, blindly reviewer. And then of course it will be taken up by the next ERC meeting. It will be discussed and the committee will decide whether to go ahead or not. And of course, your reviewers will guide the discussion because they are the ones who have completely read your protocol. And then they will, based on their findings, the committee will decide the progress, right? So there could be either rejection, it could be acceptance with major modification or acceptance with minor modification. But still, you will not get the, even if it is acceptance with major or minor, you will not get the ERC clearance letter until you correct all those and resubmit. Because sometimes what you have said is that we give acceptance with major modification or minor modification. If acceptance is there, people will go ahead with the study without even correcting your flow. So we do not allow that. So therefore, we do not give the proper acceptance letter. Right. So once you have resubmitted, so that resubmission process will go on. And if that is completed, if it is accepted later on, then yes, we will give you the acceptance letter with the reference number. So that is that you can now, if it is even with definitely with the institution with those that ERT letter will be definitely asked by the hospital administrator. And they will always ask where is the acceptance letter. So yeah, then you can use it. And then ERT number is the one when you are making when you are doing the publication. You have to declare that ERT has been taken. And that is and if the challenge is right first time up, whether it's true or not, then it's you have the line in that state.
Thank you so much, dear madam. So it was a massive vision and observation and engagement. It's actually the first breakout launch discussion featuring a resource medical
Thank you.
It introduced many new parts, new ways, even diverse perspective of literature. So thank you so much. Thanks something for valuable time and great conclusion. So, dear researchers, thanks for your participation. So let me wind up the session. We'll have another fruitful discussion in next research lab. Thank you.